Okay, thank and praise God again that we can be online together for our Friday evening service.
那我们感谢赞美神，我们能够又再一次能够在线上聚会。
In the New York area, this week we finished the Gospel of Mark and have started reading the book of Ecclesiastes.
那在我们纽约区，我们现在的读经已经把马可福音读完，开始进入到传道书。
Ecclesiastes is characterized by Christians to belong amongst the wisdom books.
那传道书在归类当中是属于就是智慧书。
Truly, the contents it affects and impacts our view of life.
那真的它的内容其实也会就是在我们生命当中会有造成影响。
It touches upon our life philosophy and our life values.
是有关乎我们自己对于人生的这种理念，还有就是我们对于这个价值观的看法。
So thank God, 2 days ago on Wednesday evening, our theological student, Brother Sean Yang, gave us a good introduction to this book.
那感谢神，在星期三的时候我们的神学生这个杨弟兄已经有跟我们谈过这本书的简介。
He talked about who the author is.
告诉我们作者是谁。
It is King Solomon.
这个就是所罗门王。
He also talked about the purpose of writing.
那也跟我们谈到说他写这本书的目的。
And then finally, he talked about some of the common terminology and phrases in the book.
那最后他谈到这本书里面常出现的一些字句。
So tonight we're going to look deeper into the contents.
那今天我们想要再做一个更深对于这个内容的来查考。
Especially in chapters 1 and 2.
特别注重在第1章跟第2章。
And in particular, I think it's good for us to review the futility of common pursuits in life.
那也让我们再一次的来思考，其实在人生追求这种很多事情当中的这种虚空。
Especially if we do not do it for God.
那特别当我们的追求不是为着神的缘故。
So even though we all participate in these things, but we have to see them clearly.
虽然我们每一个人都参与这些事情，但是我们要把这些事情看得更清楚。
We have to understand its true essence.
我们需要来明白它里面真正的意义是什么。
And to know that without God, really there's no meaning in them. Right?
来认识到说，如果没有神，那这一切很多事情其实都是没有意义的。
And so with this review, we can once again reset our life directions and pursuits in the proper way.
那所以在我们再一次的检讨之后，我们就能够在我们的生命里面再一次有一个新的方向。
Let's now turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and let's read verse 2.
我们来看传道书的第1章第2节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 2.
传道书第1章第2节。
Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity.
传道者说：虚空的虚空，虚空的虚空，凡事都是虚空。
In one of these opening verses, the preacher declares that all is vanity.
在这个开始的文章，这一个传道者他就说所有的事情都是虚空。
And he starts to explain what his thinking is.
然后他就开始解释他的想法是什么。
So from verses 3 through 11, he starts to talk about the nature of what futility, what vanity is.
从第3节以下就开始谈到这个虚空的内容到底有关乎什么。
And essentially, of all the different analogies he brings up, the common theme is first how everything is like an endless repetition.
所以在他所有提的这一些的例子当中，我们可以发现他说的就是所有的事情都是一直的在重复。
And then also everything will come to an end without remembrance.
那所有的事情在结束的时候都会不被纪念。
Right? So in verse 4, he talks about the generations coming and going.
第4节谈到这一代一代的过去。
Verse 5 talks about the sun and how it rises and sets in its cycle.
然后5节谈到日出然后日落这一个循环。
Right? Verse 6 talks about the wind blowing about in its circuit.
然后第6节谈到风根据它的道路这样回转。
Right? Verse 7, the rivers and the kind of the water cycle repeating and repeating.
那第7节就是这个江河这个水的这种循环一直的重复。
Right? And then in verse 8, speaking about how we human beings, we never are satisfied with our senses.
那第8节谈到人就是我们所有的感官都是不满足的。
So all of these various analogies from nature itself are in constant repetition.
所以这一切事情尤其是大自然界很多事情都是一直在重复。
Right? There's nothing new because it just keeps repeating itself.
因为没有新的事情，因为就是继续的发生。
This is not to say that, of course, there might be new inventions, right, or new technology.
这不是说或许有一些新的发明还是新的科技。
But the underlying essence of those technologies or inventions is the same.
但是这些新的发明还是科技的背后这个元素其实都是一样的。
Right? Like for Solomon, yes, he never rode in an airplane. Right?
没有错，所罗门王他没有坐过飞机。
But what is an airplane for?
但是飞机是做什么呢？
It's for transportation, right? Getting from one place to another.
就是一个交通的工具，从一个地方到另外一个地方。
And certainly Solomon also had to do that.
那当然，所罗门王也是要有交通的工具。
So the underlying essence of life just keeps repeating itself.
那所以生命的最基本的这种循环都是一直的一直在产生。
And then at the end of everything, there's no remembrance.
那在后来，在最终的时候就没有人纪念了。
This is what verse 11 is talking about.
11节就是这样子讲。
And this is all these things that Solomon observes is quite true.
那这些一切所罗门王所观看的都是正确的。
Whenever we feel and are involved with something that keeps repeating, we get a very clear sense of what Solomon's speaking about.
那当我们自己去经验到这种重复的循环，我们就能够体验到所罗门王所讲的。
Right? Maybe some of us also remember there's a story in Greek mythology.
我们也记得在这个希腊的神话当中有一个故事。
Where a man just keeps on rolling, I think it's like a wheel up a hill. Right?
就是有一个人他把这个一个轮子就是往山上这样推。
Right? And then once he gets to a point, he cannot push any longer, and the wheel just goes back down the hill.
那他把它推到一段时间他就没有办法推了，那这个轮子就再滚下山。
And then he repeats himself, trying to push it up the hill. Right?
那他就重新再来，想要把它往上推。
Any type of repeated thing is you start to feel that emptiness. You start to feel that dissatisfaction.
所有被重复的事情当一直的发生，我们就感觉非常的虚空。
When I was working, I worked for about 3 years.
当我在世界上工作的时候，我就是替世界上的公司工作了3年。
And I was an engineer, so we worked on different designs, right?
那我是一个工程师呢，当然我们所做的是一些不同的这种计划。
And each product probably took about 6 months to design, produce, and to test.
那每一个产品都是需要差不多6个月的时间来规划、来执行、来做出来。
So having worked for about 3 years, I went through about 5 or 6 or even more of these cycles.
那所以工作了3年，其实我已经经过了5个还是6个还是更多的这种不同的循环的这种计划。
And thank God that after the 3 years, I got into the theological seminary.
那感谢神，3年之后我进入了神学班。
Because actually by that point in time, I was getting used to that job, and I could see how this is gonna just keep repeating until I retire.
那所以我在工作，我就觉得说其实这样子一直做就是一直做到我退休都是还是一样。
Right. So, what this is the nature of vanity and futility that Solomon is speaking of.
那所以这个就是所罗门王所在谈的这种虚空的内涵。
Not only that, everything I participated in. Does anybody remember?
那不但是这样子，当我们所做过了之后，有人记得我所做的吗
？No one is calling me today about those designs.
也没有人今天还有打电话给我说你以前所做的这种规划是什么
？Yeah. So this is just generally speaking what Solomon is now going to talk about and share with us.
那所以这个就是在所罗门王以下所要讲的一个大纲。
So he starts to bring up certain life pursuits now.
所以他就开始谈到说我们一些人生的追求。
And I personally divided it into 4 categories.
那我把这追求分成4个大部分。
So these 4 categories have the same essence of what he just wrote about in the first 11 verses. Right?
那这4个部分也是跟他开始的这几节到这个11节这边的这种循环的内容有关。
Okay. And let's think about each one because we probably are pursuing the same things.
我们来看看我们其实每一个人在追求的可能都是一样。
Okay, let's read now Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 12.
看第1章传道书1章12节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 12.
第1章12节。
I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. Verse 13.
第13。
And I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men, by which they may be exercised. Verse 14.
第14节。
I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed, all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Verse 15.
第15节。
What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. Please read verse 14 and 15.
14节。我见日光之下所做的一切事都是虚空，都是捕风。15节。弯曲的不能变直，缺少的不能足数。
Starting from these verses, Solomon starts to talk about this first category of vanity.
所以在这以下我们读的这一段，所罗门开始在讲说这一些的虚空。
Right. The first category is the futility of our secular accomplishments or works.
那第一个让我们觉得虚空的，就是我们属世的成就。
Right. Solomon was king at this time.
那所罗门王其实是一个国王。
This was God's will for him.
这个是神给他的旨
And
意。
it put him in a very good position to observe his people.
那他在一个很特别的地位，能够来观察、看他自己的百姓。
Right? And he saw everyone engaging in this burdensome task that God has given us.
他看到每一个人 都是很努力的在经营神所给他们这种极重的劳苦。
Right, this actually is kind of a reference to how God cursed Adam.
那这也是关联到神刚开始的时候怎么样咒诅亚当。
Because he told Adam, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread.
因为他告诉亚当说你必要汗流满面才能够得到糊口。
Right, and so he will have to labor in order to live and survive.
他需要有劳力才能够生存。
So Solomon observed his people engaging in their work.
那所以所罗门就观察他的自己的百姓在工作。
In verse 14, he says, all of these works, all of these accomplishments, actually, it's in the end, it's still vanity and grasping for the wind.
所以他说，这也是刚之下所做的这一切事情，其实在最后都是虚空，都是捕风。
Okay, let's jump now also to chapter 2.
我们来看第2章。
Okay, this is still under the same category.
还是相同的这一个大类。
Right, under accomplishments or work.
就是在我们的工作的成就上。
Let's read verse 18.
第18节。
Actually, even from verse 17, right?
从17节开始。
Verse 17. Therefore, I hated life because of the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Verse 18.
18.
Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Verse 19.
19.
And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over my labor in which I toiled and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Please read.
第17节，所以我恨恶生命，因为在日光之下所行的事，都以为烦恼，都是虚空，都是捕风。18，我恨恶一切的劳碌，就是在我日光之下的劳碌，因为我得的必留给以后的人。19，那人是智慧是愚昧，谁能知道？他竟要管理我劳碌所得的，就是我在日光之下用智慧所得的，这也是虚空。
So Solomon, just like every other human being, he also labored.
所以所罗门王跟其他的人一样，他也是很努力的劳力的工作。
It's just laboring in a different way. He has to oversee a kingdom.
那当然他的工作是不太一样，他需要去管理一个整个国家。
But as he also went about his work, he started to hate his labor.
那当他工作的时候，他就开始恨恶他自己所做的工作。
Right, every day as a king, it's I mean, eventually it could probably get repetitive too.
那虽然是当王的即使是这样，他的生活可能也是重复的生活。
Right, he will have to oversee cases. He would have to make decisions that govern the land.
他需要来审问一些判断，然后也是要来决定一些管理这国家的事情。
And he certainly did all this with God's wisdom.
他当然用神给他的智慧，他来做管理。
But then he realized all of this is coming to an end.
但是他也发现到说，这一切都要结束了。
After all this repetitive labor, he must leave his kingdom to somebody else.
他在他劳碌之后，他的国度是要去留给他以后的人。
And so death eventually comes to all of us.
因为死亡总是会有一天会来我们需要去面对。
All the work we labor for cannot come along with us.
那我们所劳碌的一切没有办法跟着我们。
We go empty-handed.
我们死的时候空手去。
And more than that, his successor, he doesn't know if he's going to be a fool.
不但这样他也不知道他以后来的人是不是愚蠢的人。
Right? He labored so much with so much wisdom, but maybe somebody takes all that and ruins it all.
他用他智慧很努力的去经营，但是他之后的人说不定就把他毁灭了。
So what was the whole point of doing it so carefully?
那他这么仔细的很认真的来做有什么用呢？
Right? What was the whole point of, like it says in verse 22 and 23?
在22节、23节这边说到，
Right? What's the whole point of striving in your heart, right? Of being full of sorrow, having so much stress from work, even in the nighttime, you cannot rest.
这边日日忧虑，然后劳碌愁烦，甚至连夜间也不能休息。
Right? So all of this he started to think about and realize this is a very sad vanity and futility.
所以他想到这边就知道说一切都是很没有用，然后很虚空。
Right? It's just enjoy what you have for today, he concludes.
所以其实如果能够享受今天所经营的这个是他的结论。
Right? Let's now talk about a second category. Right?
那再来第二个大类型。
Right? Let's now go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 16.
我们再回来看第1章的第16节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 16.
传道书1章16节。
I communed with my heart, saying, Look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. Verse 17.
17节。
And I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. Verse 18.
18节。
For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Please read 17 and 18.
17节，我又专心查明智慧、狂妄与愚昧，乃知这也是捕风。18节，因为多有智慧就多有愁烦，加增知识的就加增忧伤。
Right? The second category of futility is the futility of secular wisdom and knowledge.
那第二大类型的这种没有用的事，还是虚空的事情，就是追求属世上的知识和智慧。
Right? Solomon was given great wisdom from God.
那所罗门王神给了他很大的智慧。
Solomon prayed very humbly, right? He said to God, I do not know how to come in or to go out. I don't know how to rule over your people.
那所罗门王很谦卑的向神祈求说，我不知道怎么样进去出来然后也不知道怎么样管理这么多的百姓。
And so he asked for wisdom.
所以他祈求神给他智慧。
God actually was very happy with this and granted him a lot of wisdom.
那神真的很喜悦他这样子的祈求，所以给了他很大的智慧。
But with all of this wisdom, Solomon felt that it was also vanity, grasping for the wind.
但是即使有这么多的智慧和知识，他还是觉得所有的事情都是捕风。
Because in the end, with much wisdom and knowledge, there was even more grief and even more sorrow.
因为在最后如有多有智慧，就有愁烦；有知识，就有忧伤。
Okay, we can also look at chapter 2.
我们来看第2章。
From verse 12 through 17 is related.
从12节到17节就是有关乎这些。
We don't have to read every verse here. Right?
我们不用整个来读。
But if we look at verse 14,
但是如果看14节，
right? Verse 13 and 14, Solomon, he still knows that wisdom is better than folly.
虽然所罗门还是知道说智慧胜于愚昧。
Right? Why?
为什么？
Because verse 14, the wise man's eyes are in his head. In other words, a wise person has more awareness. Right? He it's like he's walking in the light.
所以说智慧人的这个光明在他的头上，因为他就是比较多知识，所以有智慧。
Right? But the fool, he just walks blindly in the darkness.
但是这个愚昧人他就是在黑暗里面行走。
So on one hand, it's better, right? It's good to have wisdom.
所以在一方面来看，其实有智慧当然是好的。
But then, why is it vain?
但是为什么虚空？
Because death comes to all, whether you're wise or fool.
因为死亡还是会临到众人，不管是智慧人还是愚昧人。
Right? Verse 15, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me.
所以愚昧人所遇见的，我也必遇见。
Right? And why was I then more wise?
那我为什么更有智慧呢？
I'm going to die anyway, just like the fool.
我也是会面对死亡，就像那个愚昧人一样。
So this also is vanity.
所以说这也是虚空。
And not only that,
不过是这样子。
right? The fool is forgotten.
这个愚昧人他被忘记了。
Right? And in verse 16, the wise man also will be forgotten.
其实16节告诉我们，智慧人也是被忘记了。
Right? So when he put all of this in perspective, yes, wisdom is good, but in the end, it's all the same too.
那所以他把这一切的来做一些衡量，没有错，智慧比较好，但是在最后面还是都一样。
Okay? So this is the second category. Right?
所以这个是第二个大类型。
Let's now turn to a third category.
第三类。
Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 2.
第2章。
From verses 1 through 3.
第1节到第3节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 3.
传道书第2章1节到3节。
I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore, enjoy pleasure. But surely this also was vanity. Right? I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? Verse 3. I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. Now, please read.
我心里说，来吧，我以喜乐试试你，你好享福，谁知这也是虚空。第2节，我只喜笑说，这是狂妄，论喜乐说，有何功效呢？第3节，我心里查究如何用酒使我肉体舒畅，我心却仍以智慧引导我，我又如何持住愚昧？等我看明世人在天下一生当行何事为美。
So after pursuing accomplishments and wisdom,
所以当他追求的成就还有智慧之后，
he also started to pursue mirth and pleasure.
他开始追求这个享乐和喜乐。
Right? This is essentially trying to pursue the most luxurious, entertained, comfortable life.
也就是追求这最豪华、最舒适的这种生活。
So he filled his flesh with wine.
所以他用酒来满足他自己。
When you read a little bit later on,
我们后面再读。
like in verse 8,
第8节。
He also acquired male and female singers, the delights of the Son of Men, and musical instruments of all kinds.
他有这种得到唱歌的男女，很多的不同的能够让他享受的这些事情。
Right. So this is talking about music. It's also talking about sexual gratification. This is what he pursued. Right?
就是谈到有音乐的享乐也有就是在肉体上的这种享乐，就是他也是追求的。
So what was his conclusion?
那他后来的结论是什么？
Right? Going back to verse 2, he was thinking, this is also madness.
他说这个是狂妄的。
What does this accomplish? What does this entertainment do for me?
那这个有什么用呢？这一些的享乐对我来说有什么好处？
Right. Yeah. So this is a third category. Right?
所以这个是第3类。
Right. Now let's talk about a fourth and final category.
那第4类的最后一个类型。
From verse 4 to 11.
第4节到11节。
We can say that this is talking about the futility of wealth and materialism.
这是谈到就是钱财和物质的这种虚空。
Right. So starting from verse 4, Solomon, he built houses, planted vineyards.
第4节开始，他开始建造，然后有葡萄园。
He had gardens, orchards, and fruit trees.
他有园柚，有各种不同的水果树。
He built for himself water pools to irrigate the plants.
他造了水池来浇他的树。
Right, and also acquired a lot of laborers and servants.
他买了仆婢和奴婢。
And to have so much livestock, silver, and gold.
他有很多的牛群、羊群和金银财宝。
And a lot of the special treasures of the kings of the land.
然后也有就是属于王特别的这些财宝。
Okay. So what was his conclusion after accumulating all this wealth and materialism?
他的结论关乎这所有的物质和金钱就是钱财，他觉得怎么样呢？
Verse 11.
第11节。
Chapter 2, verse 11.
第2章11节。
Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled. And indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun.
后来我查看手所经营的一切事和我劳碌所成的功，谁知都是虚空，都是捕风，在日光之下毫无益处。
Right? No profit under the sun.
在日光之下毫无益处。
In other words, there's no permanent gain that you can have in this life.
也就是说，在这个生命当中没有得到任何增加出来的东西。
Right? You start with 0 and you're going to end with 0. Everything is temporary.
我们开始是0，结束也是0，所有的一切其实都是暂时的。
All the wealth and materialism you have will go to someone else.
我们所拥有的这些金银财宝我们的资产总是会归给别人。
So these are 4 categories that Solomon starts to talk about in these 2 chapters.
所以在这2章以内所罗门就是谈论这4个大类型。
And I think when we think about our own lives, we can relate.
我们如果想想我们自己的生活，也是可以来连接上来。
I already shared about my thoughts concerning my few years of secular work. Right?
那我已经跟大家分享了，说我在世界上工作的那几年的感觉。
Right. With regards to wisdom and knowledge, it's true. The more knowledge and wisdom you have more worries.
那有关乎知识和智慧，那真的有更多的知识智慧，就更多的担心的事情。
Right. Today we know many people suffer from anxiety.
今天我们知道很多的人都就是有这种很忧虑的心情。
And I think part of it's because today it is an age of a lot of information and knowledge.
因为今天我们活的时代是一个充满了知识爆发的时代。
We're more aware of problems and issues.
我们对于很多问题比较有知識。
Right. So I mean, just compare with 100 years ago.
如果我们比像100年前的人。
Right. People did not know about things like climate change or all these various the details of medical disease and things like that, right?
他们不会去有那种对于这个气候变化的这种知识，还是对于一些病痛的那种比较详细内容的那种知识。
Right. On the internet, you can read all sorts of problems, right?
在网上我们能够看到很多不同的我们面对的问题。
Right. I remember when my daughter was 1 month old, right?
我记得我的女儿差不多1个月的时候
she started to cough, right?
她开始咳嗽。
Yeah, and I was a new father and I started reading on the internet, right?
那因为我是新的父亲，所以我开始上网开始查考。
And I just read all some sad stories and possible problems, right?
那我就看到了很多很可怜的故事，然后很多不同的可能性。
Yeah, and that made me more worried.
那其实让我更加的担心。
But in the end, what really calmed me down was to pray. Yeah.
那后来能够把我平静下来的，其实就是祷告。
I think we also have experienced the futility of entertainment, mirth, and pleasure. Right?
那其实我们每个人都有体验到说那种享乐的那种虚空和没有用。
Yeah, there's after, of course, while you are entertained, it's happiness, it's fun. Right?
当然我们在娱乐当中应该会觉得很快乐，很好玩。
Right. But in the end, you sooner or later you will sense the emptiness.
但是不久的将来，我们就会感觉到那种的虚空。
When I was in high school, university, I played a lot of computer games.
当我在高中的时候，还是在大学的时候，其实我很常玩就是电子游戏。
And then I remember like my sophomore year in university.
我记得我在大学第2年的时候
I beat a game.
我有办法就是胜过一个电脑的游戏。
And then in the end, I felt empty.
在后面我觉得很没有意思。
Right? Just like Solomon said.
就像所罗门王所说的。
What did it accomplish?
那我成就了什么？
Yeah, I actually didn't do anything.
没有成就了什么事。
I've also, I remember in grad school, one day I watched 3 movies in a row.
那我一次在就是研究所的时候，我一天当中看了3片电影。
Yeah, I think maybe that day it was, I don't know, not that much work. So I just watched, and in the end, I just felt so empty.
那因为可能那天我没有什么事那结果那看完之后，其实那天我觉得很虚空。
Right. Yeah. I think also with wealth and materialism, we can relate, right?
那当然，这个物质还是就是钱财方面，我们也都能够去有这种相同的感觉。
When God gives us enough and our necessities, we give thanks.
当神给我们够的时候我们所需要够用的时候，我们感谢神。
But if our heart is never satisfied, if our heart is never content, it's just more and more futility.
但是如果我们的心不满足然后没有办法就是没有办法满足，那我们还是会觉得很虚空。
Right? After gaining your first million, you want 10 million. Right?
因为如果赚了100万，我们想要赚1000万。
After your 10 million, you want 100 million. Right?
我们赚了1000万就想要1亿。
And then let's say you become a billionaire. Right?
那说如果我们成了这种亿万的富翁
right? Or the first trillionaire. Right?
还是就是就是变成就是很富有的人，最富有的人。
In the end, nothing is permanent. Right?
因为其实但是在最后面没有一个是最满足的。
Right? And everything goes back to zero. Yeah.
因为所有一切都是归于零。
So in these first 2 chapters, Solomon's intent is actually, yes, it's very pessimistic, right? It begins very pessimistically.
那所以在这几章我们可以看到说，其实感觉上好像所罗门王很悲观。
Yeah. And this is actually the point of all this is to tear down our old concepts and our typical human thinking.
那他的目的就是要把我们人的思考和思想的这些建立，把它毁掉。
To help us to see them clearly.
让我们每一个人都能够看得清楚。
So most of Ecclesiastes is to tear down our typical human values.
那在传道书大部分就是把我们人的价值观把它重新改过。
Right? The more we read, Solomon's final point will become clearer and clearer.
我们如果一直读下去，到最后就能够看到所罗门王的结论。
right? Which is why is it all of these things are futile?
为什么这些事情都是这么的没有用和虚空？
Because if you do all these things and pursue all things just for yourself without God in view,
因为说我们追求这一切的事情为我们自己而做，而把神放在一旁，
right? Then this is the end, vanity of vanities.
这个就是我们的结局，就是虚空的虚空。
But on the other hand, if we incorporate God in our life, in our daily pursuits,
但是如果我们能够把神把它融入在我们的追求里面，
right? So in your daily work and accomplishments,
在我们每一天的工作和成就里面，
if God is a part of that,
如果神是那一部分，
in fact, that we labor also for the Lord's kingdom,
然后特别的是，我们也为神的国度来劳碌工作，
then it's not all emptiness and meaningless. Right?
那这一切就不是都是虚空捕风了，
Because you can transcend the repetition.
因为我们能够提升超越这一些循环，
We can transcend death too,
我们也能够超越死亡，
because Jesus came to give us victory over death.
因为主耶稣来了给了我们得胜死亡的力量。
So when we have this Almighty God integrated into our daily life and values,
所以当我们有我们这一位伟大的神来跟我们的生命里面结合在一起，
then everything becomes meaningful.
那每一件事情就变成了有意义。
Our accomplishments, our studies, our labor are for Him, for His glory.
我们的成就、我们的劳碌、我们的工作都是为了神，为了主。
The wisdom and knowledge we accumulate,
我们所拥有的知识和智慧，
we can help to build up the kingdom of God.
我们能够用来建立起神的国度，
To use those talents to spread the gospel.
然后用我们所有的这种恩赐，还是我们的恩赐来侍奉神。
Moreover, the even more important wisdom is the wisdom for salvation, not just secular wisdom.
那更重要的智慧就是那个得救的智慧，而不是这种属世界上的智慧。
When we are wise to salvation, we can have victory over death. Death has no sting. Right?
那当我们对于属灵上有智慧，那我们就能够得胜死亡，死亡的毒钩就没有办法伤害我们。
Right. We also will have a proper mentality of leisure and pleasure.
那我们对乎就是娱乐和享乐也会有一个正确的观念，
That we can enjoy what God has given us,
我们可以来享用还是享受神所赐给我们的。
but even if God allows us to go through times of need and lack, we can still trust in Him.
那即使神让我们经过我们需要还是缺乏的时刻，我们还是能够靠着他来得喜乐。
That our joy and our peace is not dependent on our environment.
我们的喜乐和我们享受的平安，跟我们所处的环境没有关系，直接的关系。
So that helps us to transcend the cycle, right, and the repetition of life.
就让我们能够超越了这个生命上的这一些无用的循环和虚空。
When we look at our wealth and our possessions,
那当我们看看我们自己所拥有的资产和财物，
and we realize that those are given to us from God, and we are just entrusted like stewards.
我们发现其实这一切都是神所给我们来掌管的，暂时的掌管，我们只是那个掌管的仆人而已。
Then we also know how to better use it, right? We know what they are for.
那我们就会知道说这一切是用的有目的是什么，要怎么样子来用。
That they are from God, so we should use them for God and His business.
因为这些是从神而来的，所以我们要用在神的事情上。
Right? And everything we do for the Lord will be recorded and remembered by God.
那当我们为神所做的一切事情都会被纪念，都会被神纪念。
Right? So without God, all these daily life pursuits are meaningless.
如果没有神，那这一切我们生命上的追求变成就没有意思。
So we must grasp onto God and allow Him to be part of our daily life.
所以我们要抓住神，让神能够成为我们生命当中的一部分。
And then it is not meaningless.
这样子的话，生命就不是没有意义。
Yeah, in the end, there is a reward, a crown of righteousness awaiting for us.
在后面我们最终的时候就有那公义的冠冕为我们准备着。
In the end, there is our Master to tell us, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
在最后，我们就有我们的主人会跟我们说做得很好，你这个很好的仆人。
Right? This is the most meaningful praise to hear.
那这个就是能够得到称许的最有意义的称许。
So may the Lord give us the right concepts and mentality to direct our steps.
所以我们祈求神能够给我们正确的观念来带领我们人生的方向。
May God continue also to help us to understand the rest of this book, right? To go step by step, and don't miss the main point.
那我们也求神能够继续带领我们，能把这本书慢慢的读不要把它读错了。
Right? Without God, everything is pessimistic.
没有神，所有一切事情看起来都很悲观。
With God, everything is optimistic and positive.
有神，所有的事情都是正面的都是很有目标的。
This concludes our evening message. Let's now kneel down and pray and ask for God's guidance.
那我们现在结束聚会，我们就跪下一起祷告。